Very good morning to everyone in India, and good afternoon, good evening, wherever else you are. We have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Jennifer Blank. She's a Blue Marble space researcher at NASA Ames Research Center in the Silicon Valley, California, USA. Hi, Jen. Good evening to you.
Hello.
It's so glad to have you with us. You are our first feature for Earth and Space Exploration Program. And we have been working together now for over, almost 5 years, 5 to 6 years now.
Yeah, over 5 years, I think.
Yeah. And it's been
6 years.
6 years. And we met in New Zealand for the first time in 2015, January, at another Spaceward Bound edition. And since then, it's been quite a journey trying to plan out India and visiting India a few times. And we are here.
And you're going to Ames and NASA Ames?
Yeah, and then coming and meeting you at NASA Ames and working for a month there as well. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jen, maybe to start with, and how are you involved in Mars analog research?
Well, first of all, can the audience see Anurup? Or Anurup, are you in the background, or are you also with us? I guess he's in the background. Anyway,
yeah.
So Sid and I are both part of something called Blue Marble Space, and this is a ragtag group of science and astrobiology enthusiasts who all share a common interest in wanting to communicate science to a general and very broad audience around the world. And so that's exciting. As far as my formal education, I have a PhD in geochemistry. I went to grad school at California Institute of Technology, or Caltech. And I went there because I read about it in science fiction novels when I was a teenager, and I dreamed of going to Caltech, and then I finally did. But it's interesting because I have a background in geology and oceanography before then, and I went to Caltech and ended up doing theoretical work and laboratory experiments. And while I liked that, I really missed being outside. So, and what do? Now I'm a sort of planetary scientist and astrobiologist, and work on Mars. It's kind of distant. So, in the past few years, I've really tried to get back to going outside and learning from doing field work, and then taking samples back to the laboratory for further analysis. But it's just I really find inspiration, both just for being outside, but also thinking about possible ways to search for life on other planets from looking at our backyard Earth. Oh, Sid, you're muted now. You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I ended up muting myself. So Jen, that's fantastic, and just the fact that you had all of those opportunities, right? And how much do you attribute being in an environment where you're around people who already have like a lot of awareness of these things, right? Tell us a little bit about how early on you caught on. I mean, you've obviously spoken about your personal fascinations, but in your career, right? How important is it to have mentors and role models around you throughout your grad school, your other research, and how does that really help?
Well, I think many people have heard that it's really important who you know. So building a network is really important. And there's a lot of discussion about having mentors too. And I think today I think more about having mentors to be role models and perhaps offer advice if you ask them. But what we really need are sponsors. So sponsors are people who will go that extra mile to help you, or to think of you for an opportunity, or to give you time when you ask for it. So that's been important. I have had some mentors who are excellent role models in terms of teaching me about how to do rigorous scientific, the rigorous scientific method. But they weren't necessarily great sponsors. And there's, for example, my thesis advisor was somebody who said, if you're the best, you won't have any trouble getting a job. And that's setting the bar so high, it's sort of for disappointment, right? And then he also told me I'd never be better than he is. Anyway, so some of his students who came before me actually left because they said he made them depressed. But I had other mentors, and actually I had an academic advisor at Caltech who was a very shy man, but he would get on the phone and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" and go seek out this, or he call up somebody and say, "Hey, do you have anything? I'm looking for opportunities for students and for my younger colleagues." So that's more of a sponsored role. What do you think, sir?
I think so as well, and especially in a country like India, where there's a bit of a disconnect often that we feel between what is expected once you finish grad school and what is taught at grad school or undergrad, whichever level you are in your education. And there's very few people who get a chance to actually understand what would they be expecting out there. And that's something that we constantly feel. And I personally felt when I was going through my own education that the people who were teaching us had been in the industry 30 years back, 40 years back, 20 years, 25 years back. And they were senior aerospace professionals. These were people who were very, very skilled at what they did and at what they taught. But in terms of preparing you for what to expect as soon as you're out there, that exposure level was not as high. And I think that makes it very, very important, because that kind of the quality of your research and the quality of your plan as to what you want to do really depends on your exposure to what is possible and what is out there. And I mean, today I think it's slightly easier because there's so much of information, like the fact that we're doing this Facebook Live, right? So somebody can be on his phone and he might have just been getting up from bed and might be looking at what we're talking about. But back then, we didn't, I mean, YouTube was around, we had Facebook as well, but you really had to look for information, look at department websites, look at everything out there and really, pull out things. So I think that's great.
And now with the internet, right? I mean, when I was going through school, we had the internet was mainly for searching. We had email, but we didn't have so many easy applications where we could make our own groups, our own connections, right? Mm-hmm. Now we can have meetups, we can have Facebook groups, we can have WhatsApp groups, and it makes it so easy to connect remotely. And there are also a lot of opportunities for people around the world to participate if you don't mind getting up at weird hours or maybe Sunday morning. No, but it's so cool. And also especially in the STEM fields in the USA, there is encouragement to participate as a young person, a student or early career within a few years of your PhD, because so many people leave STEM. Because it's exciting, but it also can be challenging.
That's right. Let's talk about Mars and Ladakh for a bit. So it's exciting times we're living in, right? There's so much going on. There's several missions to Mars on their way. There's stuff happening on the planet, on the red planet. So
did you listen to the wind on Mars?
I did. It was just fantastic. And there have been a few recordings from the past as well. So there were a few videos floating around, which were actually from the Curiosity, which is the previous, the older rover. But the recent one was also, fantastic.
Well, you could hear the laser firing, and it really just sounds like a click, and that's what it sounds like in the lab on Earth. But it just is like, wow, it's actually working. It's so cool.
It's actually working on a different planet. So getting your head to wrap around that is something. Every time you can't get used to that, basically, right?
I think NASA has made that mission look so. I mean, they've made it look easy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank goodness, right? Thank goodness. But I've had a little experience working with roboticists in analog activities on Earth, and there are so many steps that go into making that activity function correctly.
Exactly.
And that's in their back, someplace you can drive to. Mm-hmm. Just imagine this is why it takes many years and many design reviews and assessments before they even launch. Mm-hmm. And then, and also billions of dollars in the case of Curiosity and Perseverance to get to Mars and function there. So.
Yeah. And you obviously have experience being on the rover science team as well. So what is that like? How exciting is it to be part of that team?
So I've had operational roles with the ChemCam laser on the Curiosity rover. So this is the first interplanetary laser, and I have to say it's so exciting. And when you're on ops for ChemCam or for science, essentially you have to make an activity plan. Now, ultimately, the rovers the rovers take care of the rover, and that comes first, right? The safety of the rover. But they have every sol, which is a Martian day, they have windows of opportunity for science. And so they might say, okay, tomorrow you're going to get, or TOSOL, you'll get 90 minutes or you'll get 3.5 hours. And so the scientists have a very finite time to come up with a plan. So we have an activity dictionary, we can draw upon that, but we really have to plan things down to the minute, and we have to bargain and negotiate with other instrument team members to figure out what our priority activities will be. So it's actually really fun and exciting. And then, then at the end, you send your plan up to the rover people and the engineers who have to approve it. And then if you're like on an instrument, if you're representing an instrument, then you have to be on the line. And when they say chem ready, you have to say chem nominal. The first few times I did it, I was so nervous. I thought I was going to lose my voice, but it's great. I love it. And I don't know. It never got tiring, but you did have to have 8 or 9 different software applications open at once.
Yeah.
So the first few times it was very, very stressful. And in fact, the first 3 months of the mission, we lived on Mars time. So we were just every day the Martian day is about 37 minutes longer than Earth. So every day our time on Earth was shifting, and that was pretty. But we were all doing it together.
Did you have like another watch to wear as well, which was on Mars time?
I had an app on my phone.
Yeah, an app. Okay, because we always hear of these stories of all the Mars rover team having their own watches, and
I know, some of the engineers had like two time zones.
Yeah.
I never got that fancy. Free Mars app, or maybe it was $1.
So Jen, tell me about the training phase, and tell me how analog environments play an important role to simulate some of these challenges, some of these decision-making scenarios, the operations and things like that. And let's talk a bit about your experience in the field with Braille, NASA Braille.
Yeah. Okay, so my big project right now is I'm running a science, astrobiology, and robotics project up in a lava cave in California. So in the very tip of California, there's a site with over 800 caves and over 50 kilometers of cave length. And so we picked out an area to work in, and we've been working there first with just a wheeled robotic platform, and more recently with the Boston Dynamics Spot robots. And I guess the goal of our project is to see. We also had a scientific team that was characterizing the life in the caves and how characterizing it and the geochemical signature it leaves behind. So we had a whole different group, like 30 people doing science. But for the robotic mission, we're trying to direct the robots first with a little joystick, and then actually train the robots to autonomously move in the caves, map the caves, and maybe pick out where to go look for life themselves. And so what we do with these exercises, we're figuring out what doesn't work. So we're figuring out what breaks down. So if the robot goes to the right place, or if we don't want the robot to fall, but it could. We had last year we had one robot do a front flip going down a passage in the cave. It was a husky robot. I'm trying to think. I have a picture. It was pretty dramatic. And then we have the Boston legged robots. Have you guys? Has anyone else seen these? I think you've seen these, Sid.
I've seen them. Yeah,
they're amazing videos on YouTube,
and they
just
they
dance. They dance. But in the rock caves, we were really struck by how wonderfully they could maneuver across all these different types of terrain. Whether it was sort of regolith like the moon, maybe up to 10 centimeters of loose soil, or whether it was slabs of lava that had that had fallen down from the top of the cave roof. And they were able to walk, or actually rather able to enter in and out of the cave themselves too. So that's pretty exciting. But then we're still trying to figure out what's the best way to use them and how much energy they consume in terms of the battery life, and how well do we send multiple robots in, or do we drop transponders, or they call them little breadcrumbs, to keep a line of communication open, and what's the most efficient way to do these things. So these are the kinds of things we're testing with the legged robots right now. But in terms of getting ready for like a mission, like a Curiosity or Perseverance, the scientists and engineers spend a lot of time looking or practicing in field sites on Earth that might be similar. So for Curiosity, it might have been a desert environment with stratigraphy, layers of rocks that Curiosity is looking at right now. Or for Jezero Crater, where Perseverance is, it might have been an ancient delta deposit. And again, just trying to see how the rover can wheel over it, and also how the instruments can detect organic compounds or minerals or other things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and exactly right. So every environment that we know of on Earth, which is similar to Mars, has their own characteristics to offer, right? Exactly like you pointed out. Some show us the different rock layers, some show us the crater-like features. What does Ladakh have to offer us?
I mean, Ladakh has well, first of all, when you go there, you realize you're very small because Ladakh, the scale of the features are so enormous. And this is that we see this in several places on Earth, including in the USA and in China, in places in Africa where the scales are so immense. But we have up there, we have a very dry and arid landscape, very high elevation, so it has higher exposure to radiation from the sun. We have different features that it's very arid, so the Mars surface is even more arid, and it has very similar rock types, right? So a lot of large scale sedimentary deposits that we see on Mars, and igneous or volcanic rocks also. So there are a lot of overlap in features, but what Ladakh has too is it does have water, so it might be representative of a time in the first 500 million years of the Martian history, when we think there was an ocean on Mars and there were flowing rivers, and I think that's where Ladakh can be a good analog too.
And the fact that there's low oxygen and the high altitude definitely plays a role as well in terms of creating, and the high UV radiation that creates.
Well, I think so. And do you know off the top of your head what the elevation is at Leh?
So Leh is about 3,500 meters above sea level. And some of the sites are like 4,000 meters plus.
Yeah, so I know you've been there a few times, and you organized an expedition I went on in 2016. 2016? Was it 2016?
2016. Already. Seems like it was last year.
I know, but it was so smart because you had us go to Leh, and we were all very excited to go out into the more primitive landscapes. But we went to Leh and spent several days just acclimating, because it is very high elevation, and you can never. It's hard to sort of predict who will be susceptible to altitude. So, for example, someone who's very physically fit might be susceptible, or someone who's not might be fine. We had a doctor with us, and some people needed extra oxygen to breathe when we went over the high altitude passes. Some people couldn't sleep at night because they got headaches from altitude. But I think, for me at least, having the time in Leh, I had no troubles with any of the altitude. Although we did feel tired. I felt more tired.
That's right.
Because you're kind of uncomfortable. But I think when you're on a mission, you'll be uncomfortable, right?
Exactly.
So I think Ladakh is going to be a great place to do human missions as well. And I hope that's another part of the Amity Mars program eventually, is to do activities, whether it's in a spacesuit or not, just to better determine how long it will take to do scientific activities or engineering activities in this sort of high elevation environment.
I remember for Ladakh, we spent 1 full year preparing for the 10 days that we were there. And each day had been mapped out. We were a team of 30 people, and every single site, how much time each site would spend and do. And that made our life so much easier, because once we were there, even though there were a few changes of, itineraries, like one day here or there, we were still able to manage it. But Ladakh actually, because of exactly what you mentioned, that the high altitude environment and just the extreme conditions, and the fact that you're so remote and isolated, it's a very high risk scenario, and you have to really plan out each day in advance, well in advance. And that's so much like a actual mission to Mars, where you actually have to think about these things.
I know, it's really cool. And it's like the place where the Amity Mars station is about 150 kilometers from Leh. So
exactly.
It's about 5.5 hours, I think, to get there.
About 4 hours, yeah.
About 4 hours, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, it takes a while to get there, but so at least you have a city of 30,000, which is not small. That's the biggest city in Ladakh. But so at least that 4 hours away, you can get there.
Yeah.
So that's relatively close in Ladakh, right? But still,
Yeah.
you feel as though you're very isolated, and there is a road that goes away and back to Leh. So
That's right. It's not
otherwise,
too far away from the highway as well. Yeah.
yeah. So that's neat. But you're absolutely right. And I think I had been on several different expeditions for space and space bound programs where you, scientists and teachers together go to analog sites on Earth and do small projects related to planetary and astrobiology science. And yours was the best planned one I've ever been on. And I think it's because you come from engineering background. And that's one thing I've learned as a scientist. When I try to map out a minute by minute or hour by hour plan with scientists, it's very, very difficult. They kick and scream and refuse. Whereas when I work with engineers, they want me to tell them what, this is the plan. And that was, I resisted too, because I don't know, because scientists are always wanting to change their mind as the new information comes in.
Yeah.
So it was hard. I mean, it was an adjustment for me to realize that actually we have to just jump in and make a plan. And the plan can change. But until you have a plan, you're not on the same page. Right? So I think that's a very good lesson when you're working in a group. Even whether it's a draft of a paper or a presentation, you're working in a team, right? And I think many scientists, it's less these days, but certainly at like very academically rigorous universities, people work alone, right? They work alone. More and more now, when you're using big instruments, then you have to work in a team. But when you're working alone, you might not know how to work in a group of 50 or a group of 20, or even a group of 10. Whereas if you're an engineer working on a big construct, you have to know how to organize and how to people manage. And so now this integration of science and instrumentation and mission, I mean, the engineering way works better. Is to start out with that plan and then realize that it's not set in stone.
I completely agree with you. Being an engineer, I'm not going to complain against what you just said.
Because I think that, so in my team with the lava beds, most of my scientists come from universities, and they don't have that sort of mission or engineering instrumenting interaction. And so if you're looking at the outside, it might seem a little bit, you're not as specialized, you're not as rigorous with science, but actually it's a whole different set of skills to be able to do a sort of a systems approach to both the mission, the science, and the deployment. And I think for me, that's really challenging and wonderful. I really like that.
Yeah. So Jen, we'll just take a couple more questions and then move to Q&A. So the first question I have is, look, there's a lot of interest and excitement in India for Mars exploration, for astrobiology, but people always tend to look outside of India. They look at what's already been talked about, right? They look at Hawaii, they look at Mojave Desert, they look at Iceland, they look at Australia, New Zealand. But our purpose, that what we're working on together, is to highlight that there's several sites in India itself where if the right kind of scientists and researchers get together, they can do so much, given the fact that it's this unexplored environment and it's so different and so diverse in the sense that it has hot springs, it has permafrost, it has these lakes, and it's this very high altitude cold desert environment. So in terms of Ladakh, for a researcher or a budding science undergraduate or an engineering undergraduate, what are some of the immediate things that Ladakh offers that they can, kind of jump onto from your experience as someone who's worked in different kind of analog environments and also understands what would be the things that the next coming rover or lander missions would need for Mars? What are some of the things that jump out immediately in your mind?
Well, I think you raised a good point that people tend to look outside of India, and also people outside of India don't know all the possibilities within India. So there's an opportunity here, and Ladakh has that. And I think by being at such a sort of remote and high elevation environment, it's also sensitive to climate change and sensitive to variations in. It'll show sort of variations in the Earth climate history as well. So I think that, and as you mentioned, the landscape is so diverse. So I think every project you do there right now, with a few exceptions, is going to be new and new exploring, and maybe not new. I mean, people have certainly explored parts of Ladakh, but they haven't looked at it as an analog environment, right? Or looked at it as a planetary environment. So I think there's a lot of potential for, hey, I'm going to look at this rock glacier, or I'm going to look at this lake and look at the sedimentary deposits in the lake that were fed by ice and melting ice, and that could be really relevant for Mars and maybe for some of the icy moon work. And so I think everything is new. And I think one thing to point out though is that I think you mentioned this too, that there's no perfect analog. So when you start a project, you have to convince, or have to be able to make an argument that your site is a good analog for one or several reasons, right? In the case of Ladakh, just the reasons we sort of mentioned at the beginning, the fact that it's dry. It's never going to be as dry as Mars is right now, but it has the lower elevation. And there are very few places on Earth that have these combinations. I know a lot of NASA workers have gone to the Atacama Desert in Chile. And sort of one went, and then another one went, and then another one went. And so now it's sort of a better known site. But I think the same could happen in Ladakh, that once people start to visit, and they'll see all the tremendous potential there within a few hours drive. That's pretty amazing.
Absolutely. And, we will be featuring some of the researchers who will be here this year. We're hoping to get you here if
yes,
things get better.
if I get my injection.
Yes, as soon as we're all, there's so many people who have been supporting all this work since 2016, and we're hopeful to get as many as possible. But there's a few who have confirmed and finalized. We have finalized their list as well. So in this week itself, we will be announcing, the resident scientists for Earth Space Exploration Program. I should also add that whoever participates in such a program gets to be a part of a community, gets to be part of a network, which is very welcoming and inclusive. This is something I have personally experienced now almost 8 to 9 years ago. And I encourage students to join this community and this network. And just being part of that group keeps you inspired and motivated through whichever phase you are. You might be in the middle of your undergraduate, or you might be writing a PhD, and kind of helps you keep up to date with what is happening, what is the latest paper that is coming out, which conference is happening where, what seminars are happening. So it's not really a newsletter in that sense, but just the fact that there are regular catch-ups that will be happening, and that's something which students really would seek out, I think.
I think that's a great point. So, and also, just the network is important, and the fact that you're starting regular tag ups, and and like a newsletter, and also you told me before about plans to put in monitoring stations up at the Amity Mars Research Station up in Ladakh.
Yes.
And that will mean that people who are not able to go or don't go can still participate if they want to work with data that are being collected in real time, or videos that are being shown in real time, and or even dream up instruments that we could deploy there, and then close enough to civilization that someone could conceivably come out and check them periodically, even when Amity doesn't have a presence there.
Absolutely, that's a great point. And I can talk a bit about the different themes of what we will be doing, and then we'll get on to the question and answers. So as has been listed on our website, there's basically 3 themes of activities which the students will gain from, and the participants rather. It's not just for students. I should add that regular travelers are welcome to apply for this program, and they will be given a unique experience, something that they might have never been able to get, where they get personally guided by the resident scientists who will be taking them around to these different sites. So our 3 main themes are past, present, and future. The past focuses on the origin of Earth, origin of life, how did the Himalayas form, what role did tectonics play in Ladakh, as we know, is a very active, it's sitting on a fault, so it's an active environment. So observing, the dramatic rock clearings and all those different features, the rock glaciers and things around them, and how did they come to be? And also the hot springs, and how hot springs are potentially one site where life might have started. So there will be several activities which will be around observations, making scientific observations, not just looking at a rock and saying it's a rock, but trying and understanding and breaking down the story as to how did this exactly come to be, and then making notes about that, and how important it is for a scientist, for a field scientist, to take notes in an accurate way that can be referred to for experiments or any other observations.
Right, and actually how important it is to write it down, because just like making the plan that can change, You have to write down what you see, because that your first impression won't change. And you may go back and your interpretation may change, but to write down observations that are really just observations, not interpretation at the beginning, is important.
Absolutely. And then there's plans to take measurements. That will be exciting for many people to, just hold handheld instruments and take readings. And just like you had your moment where you got to say nominal, they would get to be part of a mission where they have 15 minutes, they need to step out and they need to take a few readings and then jump back into the vehicle. And just that excitement of trying to, being part of something and contributing to it.
You get nervous, but also excited, as you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. And then once they're at the site, they'll get to do several other similar experiments, geology, mapping, and microbiology, and all of those things we'll be listing out. I don't want to go into too much details.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the first theme is around origins of Earth. The second theme is around climate change. So talking about how Ladakh is an active theater where we can actually witness the effects of climate change rolling out and how it's affecting the local environment, how it has devastated certain regions around Leh, and kind of making people, giving them a chance to be a part of whatever measures we are taking from our side to help assess the conditions and comparing it from, with previous conditions, historic conditions.
And I would imagine that, putting in these monitoring stations will be a benefit to the whole Ladakh community, right? Because the parts of Earth that are more extreme, and Ladakh is certainly one of them, are the ones that change more rapidly as climate changes. So as the climate's warming, we'll see more indication of that, or rather more rapid indication of that in these extreme environments.
Yeah. And so we have been in consultation with the wildlife department, and they have in fact been installing weather monitoring stations in many regions. And we will be focusing on specific regions and giving them more data from those specific regions as well. So we are planning to work very closely with the local administration and collecting data. And every participant who comes will get a chance to do that.
Well, and Sid, you pointed me to a Facebook page called the Wildlife of Ladakh. And there's a crew of photographers already, documenting mostly birds, but so many antelope type animals and wildcats, and the photographs are amazing. And I wonder who's keeping. We could keep, as part of the activity, we could just keep count of the animals we see. Just every day at 3 p.m. or something, look at this way and see what you see, or log birds, or bird sounds, or wild asses, because I think the area is going to become part of a sanctuary for the wild ass. Is that true? Anyway, so it's exciting to be. I mean, Ladakh is changing in terms of awareness for the importance of conservation there too. So just starting as this Amity research station is getting going too.
Absolutely. So I mean, down the line, we want to open it up to other researchers who will be observing fauna, who will be looking at the different. It's a breeding ground for a few endangered species, for cranes and for other migratory birds as well.
Snow leopards.
And snow leopards, which I don't think they've seen in Sokar, but definitely in the vicinity. It's definitely listed as a place where snow leopards are seen. And then I mean, there's tons of things that can be done in terms of wildlife observation, which also is very exciting for many people who will be coming in.
Well, I think another interesting thing about analog work is that because it is so interdisciplinary, it really can go in many different directions. And it also invites people with many different backgrounds. Yeah. So I think, if you are interested in exploring sort of analog astrobiology work, you don't have to have that kind of training. You could be an ecologist, you can be an artist, you could be a communicator, and there could be a role for you at this research site.
Yeah. You actually cut me there, because Jen, I was actually going to talk about exactly that. No, that's fine. I almost forgot it, and then you reminded me by mentioning it. So we will be having hopefully an artist, a resident artist, staying at the camp. And the purpose is to invite art and design students to be part of this program as well, and see how creative forces can join scientific methods and work with the local community, engage them, and try and come up with projects. So this should be a start to people coming together. It's a meeting ground basically for people to come together and build new projects, and any and every way to spread the word, really.
Well, and actually, that's another point. I mean, in terms of design too, we will initially be living in a tent camp, but then there are plans to build a domed structure And so, like all things, you learn what works and what doesn't work by having experience. So the tent camp gives you a little more privacy, and then when you move into the domes, there'll be a little less privacy, but that will inspire designs of future habitat. Yes. Maybe even a habitat that will be sort of a winner for another planet or something. But I think that'll be the experience too. It's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So look, Jen, we've been talking for a while. I'm just looking at, we do have a list of questions. So let's try and go through those as well. So we're receiving a lot of compliments. So thank you. We have about 30 people, 25 people listening to us live, and this will obviously go up.
Thank you for getting up or turning on your phone or whatever Sunday morning.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a question from Nidish Tals. Is it possible for us to create a biodiversity in Mars by 2100? That's in 79 years from now.
The short answer is no.
Yeah, why not?
But why not? I mean, 2100. That's how many? That's 80 years.
Yeah.
80 years. Well, heck, my goal is to go to a lava cave on Mars and find life. So who knows? If we find life, and we can put an enclosure there with a YKK zipper, and then feed water and encourage life to grow. That never say never, but I think realistically, that won't be the focus of missions to Mars. I think the focus ultimately will be for some kind of resource, and probably a mineral resource. So it will be driven by, I think after the exploration phase, it'll be driven by economies.
Yeah. See, that's exactly why, I like these kind of discussions. We're not trying to build fake dreams. This is how real as it gets, right? And it's important to highlight how even these things are important. These are, again, huge steps for humanity to go there and set up some things. And that's something that we really need to talk about, rather than trying to focus on there's going to be 200 people on Mars in the next 20 years. And
But I do think that there's a place for, initially it was just the space agencies, in fact, just NASA and the Soviet Union, who were in the main competitors in the space race. But now more and more other countries have missions, but also the private sector has missions. And I think once we get astronauts coming from the private sector, who knows what will happen?
Yeah.
But once again, what's going to drive the initial race to send people to Mars?
Yeah.
I mentioned resources. Actually, it might also be ego, and the justification is not about ego, but it's about we need a backup plan in case we destroy our own planet or something like this.
Right? Yeah, and geopolitics, of course, plays a huge role with these exploration projects as well. So moving on. So question from Bharat Kinger. What will be the extra COVID-related protocol considering there is less oxygen availability in Ladakh? So I think that's two questions there. In terms of COVID protocols, so our team has been monitoring the situation very carefully. And as has been discussed in the previous session as well, there will be stringent COVID protocols taken. All the participants coming in will be screened, hopefully vaccinated. We are not putting that down as a condition because vaccines are still not available in all the regions. But as much as possible, we will ensure that the people are vaccinated. The ones who are vaccinated still would have to go through testing, and all the guidelines with regards to the masks, sanitizers, and social distancing, everything will be in place. We are working closely with the Ladakh UT administration as well. They are very much informed about the program, and also the ministries. We have been in communication, and we'll be taking approvals from the ministries as well to run this event. That's all in progress, and all the participants will be coming in. Rest assured, will be I'd say Ladakh is one of the few states that I have visited in the last few months which have been following COVID protocols to the T. They've been doing an amazing job at ensuring that the people who are coming into the state or the union territory are not having COVID, and are ensuring that they follow all the protocols as well. So that's something is a responsibility we are very seriously taking. In terms of oxygen availability, yes, you are right. And the solution for that is acclimatization to start with. And secondly, we will be carrying with us oxygen cylinders. and it's normal to administer oxygen in case there is slight discomfort and headache. So it seems like it's a very serious administration, when you see somebody wearing a mask and having an oxygen tank with him. But that's absolutely normal. It's just natural to feel out of breath because the oxygen is less. And just like Jen mentioned, it's not always related to fitness. Of course, certain people are more likely to feel more discomfort, but in general, there will be sufficient amount of oxygen cylinders with us. There will also be a medical practitioner who will be traveling with the team, and there will be health checkups as soon as somebody lands. And even during the field work, there will be somebody who will be ensuring that everybody is feeling okay. So that's about that. So Rujal asks, hello, Dr. Blank. I'm Rujal here. I would like to know what sort of experiments we will get to do in Theme 1 and Theme 3. So Theme 1 is around origin of life, right? And Theme 3 is around Mars exploration. So Jen, do you want to take a shot at that?
Well, I think which types of experiments actually is still evolving. But as Sid mentioned, we'll have a series of handheld devices. So we'll be able to say, with the case of there's a really nice hot spring site called the Puga Hot Springs, and that's about half an hour by truck from Sokar, maybe a little bit longer. And that's actually the site of the highest geothermal potential, for geothermal development in India. But right now it's still in the thinking stages. But there we could take handheld measurements with meters of pH, thermometers, or rather temperature, total dissolved solids, the geochemistry, some simple geochemistry tests to look at chlorinity, or some other different cations. We also have benchtop models to detect different types of DNA. So, for example, there's something called a qubit instrument, and with little kits, you can figure out how the microbial community is devised from bacteria versus archaea, or even small eukaryotes. And so these would be ways to sort of characterize the community in extreme environments. We do the same thing there, and then compare that with a lake, for example, a Sokar lake, or even melt some of the permafrost and do some other things. There are other instruments we could, more sophisticated instruments that would be only available for one user at a time. That might be some sort of a gas spectrometer or a mass spectrometer to determine the gas compositions. But in those cases, we might actually be collecting samples and then sending them off to a lab somewhere.
Thanks, Jen. So the scientific experiments are being discussed as we speak. Within this next week itself, a lot of science definition discussions will be happening. And as we have more information on the specifics, we will be sharing them hopefully in the next week's Q&A and then the following ones.
Well, instead, you might find also, depending on the interest of the team, right? There might be, because we do have colleagues within India who have been to Ladakh with us and who are interested in continuing to collaborate. So there might be an opportunity to either collect samples for them or even have them come in with their own instruments to make measurements.
Exactly, that's right. Question from Suryendu Saha. He asks, how can we predict, I think he signed up for the program already. How can we predict the existence of Martian life by analyzing the geological features of Ladakh? What kind of tools will be used to detect those? Also, tell the tools that will be utilized by Percy to detect life on the red planet. So which are some of the main instruments on Percy, and what kind of instruments we are talking about in Ladakh?
So the Perseverance rover, there's a lot of hype about, this is the first instrument or first robot since the Viking mission in the 70s that is a life detection mission, because they're the ones after that looked at the mineralogy, and then Curiosity could detect organics. Now Perseverance has two instruments that can detect organics also. So it's really sort of the next or a different step of organic detection. There's something called Sherlock that does a fluorescence. So microbial life, if you expose it to a certain radiation, it will fluoresce, and or rather, it will have luminescence, and that's indicative of different types of biology. And there's also, with the SuperCam instrument, there's a Raman spectrometer that will be able to identify organic functional groups. So I think since that initial, hey, this is the life detection mission, NASA has actually dialed that back a little bit to say, it's actually we'll be able to better characterize in situ organics, paired with the SAM instrument on Curiosity, where they had to bring a material on board and then modify it chemically before they could put it through a mass spectrometer. So, but in terms of how we're going to be able to practice on Earth for detecting life on Mars, that's a great question, and we're actually still designing experiments every year to better address that. The one thing might be to look at the sort of interaction and correlation between the types of microbial life we see on Earth and the associated geology or fluid geochemistry. So, and especially with the case of Mars, the mineral record. So if we see on Earth a mineral record that's in association with a certain type of microbe, that might be the kind of microbe that microbe might get its energy from, if it's an autotrophic microbe, from either a rock like that or precipitate a biomineral that could be a signature. And so little by little, we're understanding more about how minerals and microbes interact, and the chemical, how microbes actually change the chemistry of the rocks that are left behind when they pass away.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jen. The mineral microbe interaction, and also the fact that in Ladakh there's 3 distinct extreme environments within close proximity for us to test these experiments. There's the hypersaline salty lake environment. There's the cold permafrost environment in freshwater, which is less salty. And then there's the hydrothermal hot temperature environment, spring environment as well. So the fact that we can make use of all of these different environments and be able to test our...
I think that's a great point. I think a lot of the initial experiments with our growing group will be experiments where you do a compare and contrast of these different environments and what might be what cation energy or what redox environments have to offer life as we know it, and then how we can sort of rank them, and then that might help us prioritize where to look in the rock record on Mars.
Yeah, and then there's several questions here, right? Like how likely is a certain environment to preserve the life or the biosignature? That's the first question I think of. And then there's a question about, it's about the organism itself, not the condition, but the organism as to how exactly is it evolving. So that's a more microbial research question as to how are they, how likely are they to evolve in that kind of an environment and be sturdy. So a kind of a sturdiness potential for each of them in these different kind of environment as well. And the third is about the instrument. So which instruments are better suited and how effective are they in these different kinds of environments? And that actually might help us in the long run shortlist instruments, that how likely are they to succeed on Mars, given the fact that this is their performance in an analog environment.
Well, one neat thing, I guess, is that with Perseverance, the instruments that are their sort of organic detection instruments are, there are models that do the same types of analysis on Earth that are portable. So, for example, there's a LIBS and Raman system that you can wear in a backpack and carry into the field. So we don't have anyone signed up right now to come do that, but we have colleagues through our network, and we might, as this project develops, or as this group, as the research develops, I can see very easily people wanting to come. In fact, I think there's already been interest. And same with the fluorescence or fluorometer. There are portable things that you can bring and put up in a tent. If we don't get to the field itself, we could take one to the field, and then But even before we do that kind of measurement, we want to characterize the sites better and figure out the potential. So, as the scientific, as you probably all know, science is a lot of like bumbling around, and then every once in a while you get something exciting. But it's careful planning, and then figure out what's not working, and then something does work, and then you have a step change.
So exactly right. I mean, students and even the general public tend to expect some kind of a revelation or a huge discovery at the end of a campaign, and they're all waiting for that. And if it doesn't happen, people tend to get disappointed. And I think as people who work in the field, it's kind of our responsibility to explain to them that it's part of a longer story that you're all part of, and it will take its own course. You have to go through the process before which you can arrive at an.
It's the journey, not the destination.
It's the journey, not the destination. Exactly. Because, all of us, we have seen how space scientists can spend their careers working on one single mission. And sometimes they, even superannuate before the mission takes off. But that doesn't mean that they haven't enjoyed their careers. They haven't contributed towards the mission. And I think it's that aspect really that we need to drive home.
Right. If you go in expecting that you're going to win a Nobel Prize for a discovery in Ladakh, well,
Yeah.
you might be disappointed. You will be disappointed, but you
Yeah.
never know. But if you go in thinking, wow, this is an amazing opportunity to go to an incredible site, and rather than just be a tourist,
Yeah.
actually contribute to research and learn new things too, and actually interact. To me, and one of the the best things about what I do is the people I meet are by and large very excited about life and about what they do, and that inspires me in turn.
Absolutely. Great. Jen, I think we're close towards the finish. I see most of the major questions have been answered. There's a question on certification from Mon Alvarez. In case we participate in the Ladakh program, the certificate is only from Amity University or the other collaborating institutions? Does NASA participate? So you will be receiving a certificate at the end of the course, but our program is a lot more than the certificate. But since you have asked, I can tell you that the partnering organizations will definitely have their logos on the certificate. NASA is not officially a partner of this program because NASA has its own processes and guidelines through which it partners with organizations. But there will be several people who are associated or working at NASA, and Jen is, of course, one of those people. There will be several other people from NASA, also from the European Space Agency, the Australian Centre of Astrobiology, from the Indian Space Research Organization as well. There's been interest. So like I said, just wait for a few more days and we will be announcing which are the different scientists who will be participating either remotely this year, given the situation, we can't bring everybody to India, but there will be several people who will be traveling to India to participate as science mentors as well. So hopefully your question is answered, Mon Alvarez. And Yashraj, I see a question on activities and training. I think we have answered to a large extent on the different kind of field-based activities that we will be conducting. So, yeah.
So, did you? I mean, in the application or the announcements, you did say that although we want to know about your backgrounds and experience, a certain experience isn't required to participate. Right?
Yes, that's right.
So in terms of training, in other words, even if you don't know how to use an instrument, you could come and learn. That's a great opportunity, right? So
absolutely, yeah. So like with all our programs, we did the online astrobiology course, we did the in-person. We do not keep any eligibility criteria apart from the fact that, yes, you have to meet an age limit. And when you come in, if you're coming in as a student, we don't expect you to have any field experience. We don't expect you to, you should have like school level physics and math at the very minimum. I think that would be the least that would be expected if you're coming in at the age of 16, 17 or 18. So you should just be at whatever level you are, just at that particular level, your college level or your school level, science or other field, whichever discipline you're coming from, that's the only thing we expect you to be aware of and good at. Apart from that, we're not expecting you to have any prior field or instrument experience. Those are the things we will be helping train for you to get experience with. Great. So Jen, we are close to an hour. So thanks so much for taking time out. I can also tell you that I will be speaking with, I haven't had a chance to, but I will be speaking with Dr. Jonathan Clark in Australia, and hopefully we will have him for our next live Q&A session. And we will be making the announcement soon on our social media as well. And once we have announced the featured resident scientists for this program for 2021, we'll also be featuring them. And we'll also be actually featuring some of the students who participated in 2016, such as Savannah and Luke and Anushri. And they'll also get a chance to talk a bit about how did they gain from a field experience in Ladakh and how that's helped them get into their PhD programs or their new jobs and just kind of helped shape their careers and how they're so passionate about their life and going about things. So I think they'll be great ambassadors to the program as well. Great. So thanks so much, Jen, for taking time out. And any last words for the students and explorers for this year?
Well, just that if you have an opportunity to go, I would say go, because it'll be a life-changing experience. And whether it I guess moves your career on a different path or introduces you to people from other countries around the world, or both, it's going to be an experience that you will never forget and that you'll remember for years to come.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. And we look forward to interacting with all of you next week. Thank you.
Great. Bye.